Hi, everybody. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what causes performance anxiety in our bodies, and then how to deal with that when we're about to perform, or even before practicing, before going to class. It can happen anytime. So of the throngs of people that are here today, can you yell out or call out some of the things that happen to you before you perform, if you do experience anything physically? Shakes. You get shaky? Okay. Jittery. Mostly jittery? Okay. Anything go on in the head for you when you're before you go on? Say that again. Interest? Anxious. Yeah. Okay. Boy, masks are tough, but yeah. Yeah, so what's interesting is that I never thought about all the stuff I do before the performance that could help make the anxiety less, or even make me enjoy the performance more. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some kind of practice routines and things that you can do daily that will help with down the road, the performance that you have. And then what's nice is the next masterclass kind of goes along where I leave off. Adrian will pick up with more meditative and staying in the present through meditation and breathing, and that's for the next class. That's why we put these two next to each other. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Carol Mastrodomenico, and I'm a voice teacher, an opera director here at Tufts. And today it's anxiety. So we're first going to talk a little bit about the factors of music performance anxiety, MPA, and then methods for optimizing your performance, and then we'll do some exercises for imagery and mindfulness. And then I normally talk about this to voice students, so if there's time at the end. There's also a psychological impact if you've ever had a voice pathology, or so if you're an instrumentalist, if you ever had tendinitis or any kind of injury, that also can play into a heightened performance anxiety. So if we get to that, we'll do that. So the first thing I want to talk about is what's causing music performance anxiety. So you have the nervous system, which has two parts. So you have the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, and then within that you have the sympathetic nervous system, SNS, which will be abbreviated on the slides for you. And SNS has this intuitive response. It's primed to alert in the presence of danger or excitement. And what I think, you guys both talked about, some of those signs are like an increased heart rate, shortness of breath, weak knees, so you feel a little bit unstable. You don't feel like eating. How many of you like to eat right before a big meal, right before you go and sing? Yeah, hardly ever. Sweaty palms you get. Different kinds of muscle tensions. Sometimes it's in the shoulders or back, sometimes it's in the neck, it could be in the legs, hips, all kinds of different tensions. Dilation of the eyes, constriction of the GI tract, which is also sometimes why you don't want to eat something. And then I always think of Pablo Casals, because he used to throw up. Does everybody know who Pablo Casals is? Really famous cellist, look him up. And he would throw up before every performance. He had that kind of anxiety, and it's interesting because his was definitely physical, but he also had this mental piece, which most of us have, and his was that he felt like it was such a dubious honor to play Schumann and Brahms, and was he good enough to play those composers? And that played into this terrible anxiety that he had, which came out in vomiting. The alerting operates rapidly and outside of our awareness or control, right? All of a sudden, it feels like our palms are sweaty or our heart rate is fast. And so it can be ignited purely, even imagining what might happen can make these things, this heart rate, speed up. The anticipation of a performance, or maybe something didn't go so well in the last performance, or even your last practice session. And if you focus on that negativity, all of a sudden we'll feel that heart rate go up. What I think is so interesting about the SNS and how it operates is it's not differentiated between a hungry animal bearing down on you and a full house at a concert hall. It's the same amount of anxiety that can happen. I found that, I remember when finding that out, I thought that was amazing. And there are really high percentages of musicians that are affected by performance anxiety, so 55 to 70%. So that's not a small amount. So we have this other part of the nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system, or PNS, and this is the executive control center of the brain. It's the thing that calms you down. It's going to calm the body after fear. It's going to make the physical symptoms wane. Okay, and it allows us to filter out most important bits from the wealth of stimulus that's assaulting us. So we can discern what we want and throw away what we don't. In order to have the PNS win out, there needs to be a desire and motivation to choose attention. And attention is one of these things that feels like, well, I have attention. Yeah, but at any moment, your attention can shift. And so that's what we're going to work on looking at. Where is your attention when you go to practice or when you are backstage waiting to come on? The other thing that's interesting is if the sympathetic nervous system is in full gear, the so if SNS is high, PNS is pretty much idle, and we need that in order to calm ourselves down. So this is maybe sounding like bad news, okay? But it's not, because you can do things. So let's find out some of these theories of why we choke. So why we feel like we can't do our very best at the time that we want. So this is from a book, Musician's Mind. Lynn Helding came out this summer. And in it, she talks about many, many things. And we're not going to delve into all of the cognitive aspects of music and or performance anxiety. But she gives us these three theories: explicit monitoring theory, distraction theory, and the ironic processing theory. So let's just talk a little bit about these. So raise your hand, and those of you who are watching at home, raise your hand. If you're monitoring your physical movements while in action, so you're overthinking as you're doing it. Anybody do that? Yeah. And then a lot of times, what is the remedy that your teacher tells you? Stop thinking, just do it. Stop thinking, just do it. Which is great. That's true. We want to stop thinking. How do you stop thinking? So has anybody ever been told to stop thinking, just do it? When you're in your, yeah, okay. When you're told to do that, is it helpful? And if so, what do you do? What do you do to stop thinking, Joe?
I would say it's not helpful. It just kind of reminds you that you're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You need to get over it.
Yeah.
So if you have the mind space to be able to do that, then it's helpful. But if you're so caught up in it and you're too far, it's not going to be
Right. So it's also a negative. It's a stop doing that instead of do this instead. You know, like do this or, right. But this happens. So a lot of times we'll start thinking about what we need to do to make the performance be great. And, or maybe it was going well and then we start thinking about what we're doing, right? This is this monitoring theory, okay? Then we have the distraction theory, okay? So a distraction that makes it impossible to do the task at hand, okay? So sometimes that's anxiety, sometimes it's personal worries, sometimes it's you got devastating news before you had to come out. So again, I'm just gonna stop thinking about that and I'll just do it. These tend to be the same, right? And sometimes we're not aware, you know, like we're very prepared and then something distracts us. And so if we're not present in the moment of the performance, we're more apt to be distracted, right? So then we have the ironic processing theory, which also has these other names, which I'm not going to get into why they're called ironic effect or the white polar bear problem. The attempt to control one's actions in performance is derailed by the little doubts and failures that are accompanying the pursuit of success. So this is another one that I think we forget to look at. It's the way we talk to ourselves. It's the way you talk to yourself daily. It's the way you talk to yourself when you make a mistake practicing. It's the way you talk to yourself as who you are as a musician. And it's a really important one, and a lot of people think, you know, that's fluff. No, this is definitely not fluff. And it's interesting for you to, because I think it changes on a daily basis how we think of ourselves or what we're doing in a given moment. And this definitely will either help or hinder a performance. So we have some definitions of what an ideal performance state involves, okay? So there's a great book for singers called Power Performance for Singers, and Emmons and Thomas wrote it. And some of the stuff that we're gonna talk about today comes from that, but it can be used, I tried to pull all the stuff that's applicable to both instrumentalists and vocalists. So their idea of what an ideal performance state is characterized by a heightened awareness, vigilant attention, and automatic balance or calm absent of anxiety. Okay, great. But there's another thing that I like that Karen Lee Post talks about. She also wrote a book, very wonderful one. And at the end of this, there is a bibliography, so you can look at that. In her view, the optimal performance state depend on the gathering up and expenditure of just the right amount of energy for the task at hand. Whereas tension and anxiety are the result of an imbalance, such as when the energy gathered goes unspent or is inefficient for the task at hand. That's great. I love this idea of the expenditure of just the right amount of energy. Now, I am a person, and Thomas knows me, Joe, you'll get to know me, that I expend a lot of energy, probably more than I often have to at any given moment. I was also a person in my performing that was often told, okay, you gotta change you got way too much going on. Or even directly, you're too much, and that's the wrong energy. So that has to be changed. And I wish in the long run that someone had just said, you need to channel the energy that you have into the right places. It's great that you have this much energy. Just take it and focus it into the right places. And that's really what Karen Lee Post is talking about. And so it's been years, and I still work at this, but it's been a really wonderful thing to know the amount, like that I have this much energy isn't a bad thing, and also knowing how to channel it has been extremely helpful. So now we're going to talk about is more like really what we're interested in. So those are this is a very summarized view what's happening in terms of performance anxiety. There's a lot going on in your brain as well as your nervous system. But for our purposes today, let's give us ideas and methods for how to take what's happening in the nervous system and channeling it in the right way. So Syer and Connolly wrote this, another book, and they wrote it for athletes. And this was in 1998. And the things that they really focused on were the implementations of things like, first thing is recognition. You have to recognize what actually needs to be changed. And so some of that takes some time, and we're going to talk about how to do that, okay? And then you have to accept it. You have to accept the fact that there's something going on and that you're willing to change it. Then you have to have the coordination. Many things that I think, particularly in music, so vocalists, instrumentalists, it's not about one thing. If it was, I mean, I have students that ask me all the time, what's the one thing I have to do? What's the one thing? But it's always a coordination of things. So how do we take that and coordinate? And then you have to integrate. You have to put it into practice. And then it has to become synthesized, where now it's automatic. So this little train that's here is the way we're going to go about some of these methods today and trying out some of these things. Okay, so number one, we're recognizing. How do we recognize? Okay, so let's look at journaling. Okay, how many times have you been told to journal your practice? Anyone? How many of you do it? Okay, there you go. All right, so it seems like a lot of work. It also seems like busy work. So what I would say is, and what I tell my students is, you don't have to journal every moment. And I think in some ways, it's more important to journal the things that feel good than the things that don't. I'm not saying don't do that. I think it's helpful to also journal what doesn't feel good. But if you don't also journal what is feeling good, a lot of times you can take what's feeling good, and that will make what's feeling bad better. Also, too much focus on the negative creates a negative mindset. And also, I think it's really important to realize that when I ask my students, so what went well? They can't tell me. You mean nothing went well? Well, I don't remember, but I remember what went badly. Sit on that for a second. Okay, so if you can't remember the things that are going well, journal them. Just, a spiral notebook. It doesn't have to be a fancy journal. Oh my God, I said a notebook. You could even do it on a computer. You could do it on your phone. You could take the notes in your phone and just, this went well, date. Okay? These are the things that are going to help you, because then you can talk about them in your lessons. Also, you can also see patterns. Oh my gosh, look, this felt great all 4 days, and this didn't. The other thing that's sometimes, that's very important in journaling is remember if anything like devastating news, like anybody watching the news these days? Did you get a news alert and all of a sudden your practice session was bad? I mean, or maybe you got news from something else, or maybe you got a bad test grade and then you went to go practice. So also noting those kinds of things, because although it seems like we handled it, we probably didn't. And also you can see that when you journal. The other thing that I think is helpful in recognizing is the exaggeration exercise. So normally I would have you, sing some things that are, so if something feels tight, exaggerate it. Exaggerate it so that you can feel, I definitely know I don't want that. Breathe. Try it again. And so this way, by exaggerating whatever it is that was not the feeling that you want, it will actually help you feel that sensation and then back away from it. So a lot of times what we'll do is, I know I'm tight. Oh, I don't want that. But look what we do. We go like that after we feel the tension, right? So exaggerate the tension, back away from the tension, okay? Unfortunately, we won't demonstrate anything vocally, but you could, sometimes it's the way we inhaled. That can have a tension in it. Okay, what does that feel like? What am I feeling in my chest when I do that? Okay, now I'm gonna put my hand here, I'm gonna inhale, but I'm not gonna lift my chest. Okay, that feels better. Now what did I feel somewhere else in my body when I did that? So that's what I'm talking about. I wouldn't spend 5 hours, so those of you who are overzealous, exaggerating the things that were wrong. However, every once in a while, exaggerate exercise. So the next one is usually a handout, but I didn't want to bring paper for you guys to touch or become infected. This one I have started handing out to my students in my studio. And it's a very simple little sheet. It says, why do I? And it has these 3 dots because for my students, it's why do I sing? So for those of you who are instrumentalists, why do I play? Why do I perform? Why do I practice? So it's really interesting because I think people think this is just always going to stay the same. It doesn't. Particularly practicing. Like, why do I practice? Well, on a given day, that can be different. Also, why you choose to sing or perform can be different. It can be daily different, it can be yearly different, it can be monthly different. The thing that I think is important is often when someone, and students do not have to share this information. This is, absolutely voluntarily shared or not. But when you write down why do I practice and it says because my teacher wants me to, or because I want my teacher to know I practiced, or your teacher shouldn't be in why you practice. And often I'll have a student say, because I want Carol to know, I want to do it for Carol. And that's lovely and I appreciate that, but if you're not doing it for yourself in some way, you're not going to keep doing it. Because then it's an outside influence. Also, it's interesting to find out, like maybe you went to practice just because there's a song that you really wanted to sing that day. Maybe you don't want to do the things that your teacher told you have to do technically, and you just want to sing and see what comes out. And you could write that down and do that. Also, the first one, why do I sing? That's sometimes I'm amazed at how hard that question is to some students, to some people, some adults. I just always have. That's not an answer. I asked her why. Why do you? I'm glad you always have, but why? Why have you? What does it do for you? Does it bring you joy? Does it feel good when you do it? There's any number of reasons, but make sure you know what they are. And then, of course, knowing why you perform. And like Pablo Casals, I would really be interested in what his answer was, being that he went through so much trauma in order to do it. So this is something that I can send out to anybody who wants. You just email me and I can send it as a digital copy. And this way you can use it weekly, daily, whenever, because the answers are going to change. So there's recognition. Now we have to, really get the acceptance and target this and get concentration going. So one of the things that you can do as you're practicing is target an area of the body as you are playing, singing, okay? So let's say it's just a 9-note scale or whatever kind of scale you're doing. And concentrate how your right arm feels while you're doing that scale. That's it. Just do that scale. My right arm feels great. Or why does my right arm feel like that? So it can be, and you can target different parts of the body as you're doing different exercises. So that this way you don't have to focus on the entire body, but just one aspect of it. How does my left leg feel while I am standing and singing this exercise? And you do it. One exercise, target that part of your body. Maybe that part of your body feels great, and then when you go to the next part of your body, okay, but now I'm going to target my pelvis, and my pelvis feels like really tight. Well, I'm going to move it around while I sing. I'm just targeting my pelvis so that as I'm singing, when it finally feels like that's where I want to be and that's the sound, I'm going to focus on that. So just targeting one area of the body rather than going at a whole. This one we can do. This is a breath exercise, and it's really helpful, especially when you are feeling that fast heartbeat and maybe a pant starting before you get anxious. But it's also just a good thing to do, because you're going to find what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in 1 count and out 1 count and in 2 counts and out 2 counts and in 3 counts and out 3 counts and in 4 counts and out 4 counts until we do 10. And usually along the way, you're going to find a number that works really well for you. And there is no wrong or right number. It's just, so we're going to do this, the 2 members of that are in here, and I just want you to sit in the chair so that you feel relaxed and comfortable. Okay, arms maybe on the rests or wherever they feel comfortable. Head is balanced on the spine, right on top of your body. And I'll do it this way. We'll go in, out, in, 2, out, 2, in, 2, 3, just like that, okay? And ready, in, out, in, 2, out, 2, in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. What number did we like? Was there one we liked? Was there one we absolutely hated? 6 or 7. Excellent.
I like 4. The 4 was good.
Okay, that was Tom. Wow. Sound was traveled. You liked what? 4? Okay, excellent. So again, there is no right or wrong number. Did it, as you went up to like 10, did it bring anxiety as you were breathing in this long and then breathing out that long? Yeah. Okay. So especially when you feel 1 in, out, in, 2, out, 2. So by the fast breath and then getting slower to even go to like a 5, that's the part that's really helpful when you're feeling anxious, because you're going from a okay. So it doesn't have to overwhelm you. And if you've done this before you're anxious, it's much more helpful. Also, there are many great singers that talk about breathing in for extraordinary long amounts of counts. And so there is there's a lot of good use for feeling like you can breathe in this air for long periods of time and it feel good. So the whole point is, you're not going to go to these numbers that don't feel good right now. You're going to do the numbers that feel good and add as that feels better. But there isn't like, oh, now get to 10, now get to 11, now get to 12. Don't compete with yourself that way. Do the ones that feel good for as long as they feel good, okay? And also, when you're anxious the next time, just try it to see if it helps get you in a place, because now your body, now you're in control of the breath rather than the nervous system in control of it, okay? Okay. So this one is also a concentration and realization of body awareness. Awareness from your head to your toes and toes to your head. Have you guys ever done any kind of theater? Because a lot of theater programs do this, where everybody's lying on the floor, and you close your eyes. Sometimes the lights are out, and then whoever's the moderator starts making you aware of maybe the toes, your big toe, middle toe, third toe, fourth toe, pinky toe. Now take that awareness and go to the ball of your foot. Now take that awareness, go all the way down to the heel of your foot. Hey, how does your ankle feel? And bringing awareness to the way your body feels. And again, it's a targeting, but it's also being able to be aware. Have you ever done that exercise and all these other thoughts are going through your head? Yeah. So it's also like the first time I did yoga and everybody was like, oh, this will be great for you because it quiets the mind, and yoga is great. Wow, did it take me a long time, because my mind wouldn't go there right away. And so, you know, sometimes when you're lying down there and you're being told, focus on that, you have to practice it. You have to practice focusing your attention, and you have to also take the time to be aware of how things feel in your body. It's not, sometimes it just doesn't, it's not just there. Sometimes it takes a little bit of awareness and time to become more aware. Think about how now as a musician, when you think about hearing and what you listen for, think about when you were just starting your instrument, how you listened to things, and then 5 years into practicing, how that changed. And then it went 10 years into playing. And now you're definitely aware of different things because you train the ear, what you want to listen to. You also have more knowledge about what you're listening to. But you also are taking the time to work on that. And for some reason, we like doing that as musicians. Most musicians do. But, you know, becoming aware of the way my kneecaps feel as I'm practicing, or the way my ankles feel, and I will put in a plug here for Nina Barwell's class, because she'll be doing Alexander. And these awarenesses of the way you're sitting and the way you're moving and the way the joints work together affect how you play. It's been proven. But more so, the more effort you exert, or unnecessary effort that you exert, that affects your playing. It also makes you tired. We want the least amount of work with the best result. That's what we want. So I encourage you to lie down and do this exercise. I won't make these two lovely souls do this today. Also, it is more meditative, which again, Adrian will get to next week. Okay. The other thing, I would be curious though, if we could do a little bit of breath awareness in different positions, okay? So we'll skip the lying down because it's kind of hard to do that in here. But can you crisscross your legs in the chair? And those of you at home, can you crisscross your legs? So if you're crisscrossed and you're sitting there, and now just breathe in for, let's do our famous numbers, 4. We'll breathe in for 4, 2, 3, 4, and we'll breathe out, 2, 3, 4. We'll breathe in, 2, 3, 4. We'll breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Now what I want you to do is I want you to put your knees down, like the way you were sitting before you put them up. Okay? And now I'll do the same exercise. So Joe, don't lean forward on them because that's going to be a different thing. Okay, so we're back in the chair and the legs are down and we're breathing in. 2, 3, 4, out. 2, 3, 4, in. 2, 3, 4, out. 2, 3, 4. Okay, now stand up. Okay, ready? Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Great, sit down. Okay, definitely differences, right? What did you feel? Let's start with crisscross. Were you more aware of breath? Were you more aware of expansion? Were you, like, I didn't feel anything when I was doing that? What did you feel?
Calm.
It felt calmer when you were crisscross. Okay, Joe?
Yeah, I feel like it was a lot more like air. I felt I was expanding more, but I didn't necessarily notice it. It just felt like there was more air.
Yeah, okay, when you were crisscross.
Yeah.
Okay, then when you put your legs down, was it different?
It took more effort, it felt like.
Took more effort, and then when you stood?
There was like a good mix between the two, standing.
Okay, and Thomas, shaking your head over there? Don't like standing and breathing? Oh, yeah, okay. So, right. So for those of you at home, this is a 300-seat hall, and these two lovely souls are the only two here. So Thomas, I think, felt a little self-conscious. I think it's interesting, though, that when you were crisscross applesauce, you could feel, as Joe said, more expansion, or it just was easier. Like you felt the expansion without trying to feel the expansion. And these are the kinds of things you want to do so that, okay, well, why aren't I crisscross applesauce to start before I practice? And how can I take that awareness of that expansion and bring it to when my legs are down and then to when I'm standing? So we even have one here where you could be kneeling. So like there's these levels that you can do. And everybody's a little different, but usually crisscross applesauce, or the way Joe you were, Joe was down like this with his hands like this, because that'll also help find an expansion in the back as well. Abdominally, let's go, right? So anyway, okay, we'll move on. Okay, so now we get to imagery, in which we're gonna do some exercises here. And so imagery is an interesting thing, and I think for me, I used to always think of imagery and visualization as exactly the same thing. But you can imagine smells, sounds, things that you touch. It's not just visualization. And I think it's interesting that, like when you see Olympic athletes come in, particularly I'm thinking of swimmers, they have their headphones on. There's either music on that they've associated with this. You've seen them visualize what they're gonna do when they go out there. Ice skaters do it. So many athletes do it. And I think that we as performers, we as musicians can use imagery a lot more. I think it's important to understand that you're going for an imagery that's as realistic as possible, which means more of an attention to the sensations of those things. and the vitality of them. So I would like to do some of the imagery exercises for each of the senses, unless you guys are getting bored. So if after we get to like touch, you're like, I'm done, just raise your hand, okay? So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna start with sight, okay? But it's with your eyes closed, okay? So you're gonna sit comfortably in your chair and relax, close your eyes, and you're gonna allow yourself to imagine the following things. A famous person who you find attractive. Are you breathing? Good. Imagine a bright orange sunset over the ocean. Imagine your favorite concert space and you gazing out in wonder. Okay. Imagine a bright yellow circle. Start seeing it in full bright color. Then watch the circle change its color to black. Change the shape of the black circle to a black square. Allow the black square to become a long black line that disappears in the distance. Make the line come back to you and it change into a wonderful green triangle. Okay, you can open your eyes. Okay, so let's talk about, was a famous person who's attractive easy or hard? Quick, easy. Okay, great. How about the bright orange sunset over the ocean? Nah, not so good. Okay. How many bright orange sunsets over the ocean have you guys seen? Not many. Okay, see, that's why. All right. How about your favorite concert space and you gazing out? Was that easy? Okay. All right, now what about the one that morphed? Joe's like, no. Okay, both of you? Okay, was there any part of it that you were like, you were with us, you were with me, and then you're like, no?
I think once I started getting into it, it was easier, but focusing first on that circle was really hard. So I wanted to see it in space, the yellow circle.
Okay.
But then once I started like understanding the pattern and like trying to visualize it, it was really easier.
Right, so it's really important, like figuring out which of these images were vivid to you. Because then there are some people who are like, well, you have to work at making the yellow circle vivid. No, you have to find a vivid image that works for you. It doesn't necessarily have to be that yellow circle. And maybe the concert space is the thing that you should be visualizing before you walk out, because it's got a positive feeling. Also, were there colors that were easier or harder? Was like yellow easy, or did black have a reaction? What? Green was hard. Okay.
Yeah, I think the opposite. I thought green was probably the easiest.
Green was the easiest? Yeah. So I've had some people, when I do this exercise, black, when it turns to black, it feels very devastating to them. Like, oh, why is it dark? Black to them represents darkness, I don't know. So the point of this is, there are things like, you haven't seen a bright sunset over the ocean, so that's not something that's vivid to you. Can you think of something, you don't necessarily have to say it out loud, but that you could immediately go to and it would be a pleasant visual image? Or a vivid image? Yes, Joe has one. Yeah, okay. So those are, things that you can hang on to and use, okay? So let's go to sound next. Are we okay with this, or are we are we ready to, okay. Okay, so what we're gonna do is, we're gonna do, this you don't necessarily have to close your eyes, it's up to you. We're gonna use visualizations that are sound. Sorry, we're gonna use imagery that is sound. So make sure you're comfortable. Okay, and the silence of a thick fog, a wall of gray mist. Church bells ringing in the distance. The voice of your favorite singer. The wind whistling in the trees. A telephone ringing. A dog barking next to you. Now allow the dog to move away from you. Hear it in the distance. Birds. A child's laughter. Okay. Which one was vivid? Or were any of them? What, Thomas?
Dog barking.
The dog barking? Could you make the dog go away in the distance? Okay, good. Joe, do you have any?
I struggled with the dog. I think that was my hardest one.
The dog was the hardest one. Do you have dogs?
No.
Okay. So interesting that child's laughter was not hard for either of you. Excellent, because you're like, how old? Okay. But sometimes children, like adults are like, oh, it's my child's laughter, but excellent. What about church bells? Do you hear those a lot? That was just medium. Okay. The voice of your favorite singer, was that easy? Yeah. There should be like your favorite saxophone player, or your favorite trumpet player. Okay. Okay, were sounds easier or more vivid than some of the visuals? For Thomas, yes. Okay, Joe also. All right, let's go to, let's do touch, and then maybe that's enough of these. Okay, again, get yourself comfortable. Okay, we're gonna imagine the warmth of the sun. The softness of silk next to your skin. The deep textured bark of a tree under your hands. The richness of deep velvet. Warm, coarse sand. Your skin when it's warm. Anything vivid? What? The sun on your face, or the warmth of the sun just, okay?
I thought the tree bark was vivid because it reminded me of being in pain, rubbing against the tree.
Uh-huh.
So not in a good way, but.
Okay, that's cool. How often do you touch velvet? Okay. I see now, I won't say. Okay, and then how about hot skin, when your skin is warm? Is that vivid or not? Not so much, okay. So touch, easier than visualization? Because we said sound was the most vivid. So was the sensation of touching, was that more or less vivid than visualization?
Less for me.
Less for Joe? About the same, okay. And still was sound the most vivid? Yeah. So that's an interesting thing, and it's something that I think we get away from because, of course, musicians, sound is going to be vivid to us, but we often focus on what the sound that we want to be making, or should, that word, should be making, instead of some of the sounds that create a calmness in us. So I encourage you to think about those things, find them, and use them, because they'll help you. And then we're not going to do this as an exercise, but there's also a way that you can, as if visualizations, to do a performance as if you were a child, as if you were a character. This is fairly easy. This is why a lot of times singing a role in opera is easier than some like concert performances or recitals. And it's why sometimes instrumentalists need to, give their part. They have character. And so if it's a character, it's not you up there, it's the character, and that can sometimes help with nervousness or anxiety. Okay, and then be sure that when you're doing all these things, you're journaling and you're creating a practice routine. Make sure that your observations in your journal, and if you're doing visualizations and finding things, that you're writing them down. And always write down the things that were enjoyable. Write down the things that felt easy, and then write down the things that were effortful. And document them. Do they stay the same over the week? Make sure you have a practice routine. For vocalists, we usually do a 5-minute warm-up. Technical things happen between 15 to 45 minutes. And you have to set specific goals when you go in there, rather than it being just, I'm going to practice all of this today. And then make sure you cool down. And a lot of people forget the cool down, which is, again, another about 5 minutes or so. Okay, so this is one of the really important things I wanted to get to is general affirmations and positive self-talk. So things that you know about yourself that are positive. So first, just general ones, like, I am a very charismatic person. I am a very energetic person. I am a very passionate person. I enjoy long walks. Okay, whatever. I enjoy humor. Those are the things that are like general affirmations. And then you also have performance affirmations. So what are the things that you feel like you do well as a performer? And I can't tell you how hard this is for students to fill this out. But it's really important that they be specific to your singing or playing. And they can be as, simple as, I sing with great expression. I communicate honestly. I have great high notes. I have great low notes. I play with great agility. I have great bright color in my playing. Whatever it is, make sure you know the positive things that you do well. And then this one is so important. Oh my goodness. The way you talk to yourself is important. I will tell you a little story. I was downstairs. We have an upstairs and a downstairs in our house, and I was down in the basement where the studio is practicing. My husband was upstairs, and he could hear me downstairs. This is like 5 or 6 years ago. He could hear me yelling at myself. So I would sing something, and I was like, well, that was terrible. Why? And then I sang something else, and I'm like, that was idiot. Why would you? And I was yelling at myself as I was practicing. And he comes down the stairs, and he says, I just want to point out that you would never talk to a student the way you're talking to yourself right now. And then he walked back up the stairs. And I was like, oh my God, he's right. And then I started to analyze, like, how is it that I talk to myself on a given day? and particularly when I am practicing or after I've done a performance. And I found that a lot of what I was saying was negative. It was all the things I should be doing. Or, I felt hypocritical. I'm a voice teacher, but that's not right. That's not how I would want a student to sing that. And that was not really helping me get there by telling myself those things. So you have to change that. You have to talk positively to yourself. And I am someone who talks out loud, so I know there are a lot of people who don't talk out loud. But you talk to yourself out loud, inside, and that has to be positive. So there's an exercise, and it goes along with this handout, but we're going to go back to this, which obviously I'm not going to make you do in here, but I would like you guys to think about it. And again, if anybody wants this, these can be downloaded and sent to you. But your general affirmations are you as a person, like how do you see yourself? How do you think others see you? And how do you see the ideal self, your ideal self? And then you can do the same thing as a performer. And I'm always interested in what's the easiest. Like, is it easy for you to talk about how you see yourself? Or is it easier for you to talk about how others see you? Or is it easier to talk about your ideal self? So for me, it was always easier to talk about the ideal self. Because when you write these down, they have to be affirmations. And a lot of times when I would talk about myself, the way I see myself, it took me a long time to find the positive things to write down. What would immediately come up is negative things. Thinking just, based on those three categories, do you guys have one that you think would be easier for you? Ideal self. Mm-hmm. What about you, Thomas? How other people see you? Okay. And remember, those are supposed to be positive also. So, and then as a performer, do you feel like that would be the same? Would you be able to jot down easily positive things you as a performer? Or how others see you as a performer and your ideal self as a performer? Which would be easier there? Would it be the same? Ideal there? Joe's like, I don't know, stop asking me questions. Yeah, so that one's an interesting one for you guys to try out. I think a lot of times if ideal self is the easiest one for you to fill out as a person, then usually ideal performer is going to be easier. Those of us that view ourselves negatively just in general usually focus on the negative thing first for performing. So think about the things that you do well in playing or singing, and make sure you jot them down. You have to know them because, for many reasons, but our industry, there's not more rejection than any other place. The amount of rejection and negative feedback you get from the musician and performing world is probably one of the harshest of all careers. So if you don't know what you do well, oftentimes an auditioner is not going to tell you. It's not solely the job of your teacher to tell you what you do well. You have to know it as well. And when you get off the stage after you've performed, you have to know what you did there. So I leave that with you to do on your own, and I leave that with the people at home to do. So then synthesizing, making these things come together. Sometimes we will do exercise, singing or playing with one-word cues. Like sometimes when somebody's singing and you yell out the word open, it tends to open the sound. Sometimes when they're playing, you say float, and then that sound gets floated. Excite, stretch, loose, rotate, bounce. You would just say these words as you're playing or singing, and I will also leave this as an exercise you can do when we are allowed to sing and play together, and I look forward to that happening sooner rather than later. And then, of course, this is the part that Adrian's going to do and that Nina Barwell's going to do, where there are many, many body strategies that you can use to help your playing. Body mapping, Alexander, Feldenkrais, yoga, Qigong, Tai Chi, the kinesthetic body inventory, somatic learning, and then of course meditation and relaxation through breathing. So some of these things will be covered in later talks. Okay. So the last part, which we can do just a little bit of, I won't get into this too much, is injury, but more so how that impacts your playing and moving forward. Voice injuries tend to affect self-confidence, and I know tendinitis and injuries that prevent players from playing affect their confidence too. And it affects self-esteem, and it also, it is judged in a way that is not fair. So I know for vocalists, it's often judged that the singer has done that to themselves. And I think to some degree, instrumentalists get the same thing, like cellists or who played, oh, you know, I've tendinized, that was because you played too much, or the way you were playing was. But we don't look at athletes in the same way that we talk about injury in music. And so I bring that up here because this affects self-esteem, and it's not helpful to anyone. It's not helpful to the performer, and it's also not helpful in the environment. When someone has an injury, they're devastated. They can't play their instrument, and it's something that they need to nourish themselves. Sometimes it's to feed themselves because they're professional musicians. So somebody telling them that they did it to themselves is really, really not the best line of defense. And I encourage all musicians to adopt this on social media. The nicer community, whether you like the way someone sings or plays, shouldn't matter. The whole, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. Particularly when someone has injured themselves. Like if some singer, we find out that they're going to have surgery or polyp or whatever, and somebody writes, well, that's because did you hear the way they sang? This is what they sang. Sometimes these things are extremely random, and that doesn't help her or you to be that negative. So I encourage you to be more generous and more supportive when you hear of an instrumentalist or a vocalist who has had an injury. I will also say that more often than not, after an injury, both player and vocalist are more fearful every time they go to play, that the injury will recur. So something that can be done are some of the exercises that we did to build up self-esteem, also getting a really good team together, a health team, so that you have the confidence to know what's going on and how to fix it. So we want to, when a baseball player lands wrong and his knee is busted, we don't say, well, he was a bad player, it's because he landed wrong. So don't do that to your colleagues. Usually a singer's and a player's injury has multiple causes. And then the other thing that I think is really unhelpful is that, at least in the singing world, classically, we hide it. We don't talk about injury as much as we should, and it's much more common than anyone would ever believe, because it's part of our body, and there's multiple reasons why things could have happened. So singers and players need to work in an environment that does not have fear or reluctance. So please pass on to your friends, pass on to your fellow students, that a supportive environment for everyone is a better thing to do. Don't put the blame on them. So one of the things that we talked about with positive is that doubt is going to really be an overrider if anybody has had an injury. Some of these things happen, like, in my career, will I ever recover? Did I do it to myself? Does it mean I'm not a good player or singer? And what will my colleagues think? And how am I going to get through the performance commitments that I have? Or when can I sing again? When can I play again? All those questions. So you need to create a safe and experimental, non-judgment space. Find a teacher that will help you do that. For singers, they need voice specialists and also ENTs. So you want to maintain the fun while you're sampling sound. This is a good opportunity to just play with sound after an audition, an injury. These are some things that I think some people don't think about, but look, you have this opportunity to now, that wasn't working, or maybe something that you were doing had more tension. You could come out the other side of an injury a much better player, because you didn't even realize the amount of tension you were using to play, and now you have the opportunity to do that. The only way to do that is to play with sound. What would be great is if you were playing with sound before the injury. Like, you can do that now so that you don't wind up getting an injury, maybe, who knows. But again, setting incremental goals, the specific pacing, and acknowledging small accomplishments, and I think that is a good thing to do no matter what. So if you come out of a practice session after an injury particularly, but anytime, and an exercise like 4 bars of something that you couldn't play as well or as fast or as dynamically contrasting or better, but maybe the whole piece wasn't, you need to own that. You need to take that. You need to take that with you. Walk around with it that day. I did that. Those 4 measures were great. And then always resume after an injury, and you're going to resume practicing in low stakes events and maybe with more friends around you. I also encourage you to do that before any kind of injury happens. Getting groups of people together after COVID is a good thing to do before you have to do it in a large hall. And then adding these 2 people to the team are great. And then that's it. So does anybody have any questions about what we talked about? Normally we would do a few more exercises, but I think we're good here. So if you guys don't have any questions, I think we'll call it a night. Thanks for coming, guys. Thank you for listening.